We're about to go interview Representative Tony Gonzales. He is the congressman who represents the most miles of the U.S.-Mexico border, 42%, or 2/3 of the Texas-Mexico border. He is a big proponent of Ukraine military aid, Israeli military aid, and a 20-year Navy veteran. First, family separation pay. You are a big fan. It's a provision in the fiscal year 2024 defense policy bill that raised separation pay first time in 2 decades from $250 to $400. The Pentagon, though, hasn't implemented those increases. They say they are studying the pay amounts or whatnot. Is that a timeline that you are all right with, or do you see it as, a little bit of a slow walk toward the finish line, if you will?
Yeah, the timeline should be now. Having spent 20 years in the military, having been deployed for years of that 20 years, family separation allowance is so critical to our military families. The fact that it hasn't been raised in decades is almost criminal, and the fact that we got it to 400, is incremental. There absolutely has to be more that needs to happen. They're not going to implement it immediately. I've already had conversations with several folks at the Pentagon. We'll continue to have these conversations, and I will push for them to get it done immediately. There's no reason why families should be put last in the military equation. I get it. We need bombs, we need BBs, we need housing, we need all these other things. Don't get me wrong. Those are all important things. But our family unit needs to be the most important aspect of the military service, and raising that family separation allowance from $250 to $400 needs to happen immediately.
Do you see it as a way to help recruitment and retention then too?
I don't know if that's necessarily going to go, $400 is going to be the reason why I raise my right hand, but it's certainly going to help the family. And so to the point of retention, absolutely. I think anything we can do to make your family more successful, and part of that is pay, a large part of that is pay. If you're worried about paying your bills at home, guess what you're not worried about? Fighting the enemy, training, doing all the things that you were basically brought in the service to do. So I think it's absolutely important to the fighting force that we raise this pay. And I'm not going to. This is how it's going to work. I've asked nicely. I've asked nicely to go, hey, look, I get it. You're studying it. You're thinking about it. I'd highly recommend that you implement this. And then the next step is when they come before. I sit on the House Appropriations Committee. So guess where they're all getting their money from? The Appropriations Committee. The next step is when they come before the House Appropriations Committee and testify. If they don't do that, then I'm gonna fire both barrels at them.
Absolutely. So also something a bit personal to you. The Navy last month announced that folks without a high school diploma or GED could enlist. They just have to score a 50 on the Armed Forces qualification test. You enlisted under a similar program in the 90s. So just tell us a little bit about that. How did you enlist? Before it was Representative Tony Gonzales, what about enlistee Tony Gonzales? What drew you in, and how did that program help you get in?
I love that the Navy's bringing this program back, because it highlights what it is to be an American. Essentially, if you're given an opportunity, it's all about how you take advantage of that opportunity. So I think back to my story. I've lived on my own since I was 15 years old. I worked 2 and 3 jobs to make my way through high school. I was a half credit away from graduating, a half credit. AP classes, never in any trouble. I just was dealt a tough hand. And my grandfather, who was essentially my father, passes away. So I'm working 2 or 3 jobs, trying to kind of just keep my head above water. And then I drop out of high school, kind of going nowhere. I go to the Army first. Actually, my father was in the Army. My grandfather was in the Army. I go to the Army, and the Army said they couldn't take me unless I got a GED. And I go, here's the deal, man. If I wanted to get a GED, I'd have done that 3 years ago. I've been fighting for this high school diploma. So my cousin was in the Navy, and he goes, Tony, you should go to the Navy recruiter. I go, why would I do that? 1, I don't know how to swim, okay? 2, I don't like sailors, and I don't like the water, right? I don't like ships. He goes, you fool, just go. The Navy does so many other different things. Just go to the Navy recruiter. And so I go to the Navy recruiter in San Antonio, across from Ingram Park Mall, and the Navy recruiter's like, boy, do we got a deal for you. He goes, you scored great on your ASVAB. He goes, we can make you a cryptologist. I go, I don't even know what that is. And he goes, neither do I. And he pulls out this card and he reads what a cryptologist is. National security clearance, working with NSA, computers, doing all these different things. And that's how I joined. I learned to swim 2 weeks later when they pushed me in the deep end of the pool at Great Lakes. I get my high school diploma when I was stationed in Pensacola, Florida. So I go on, I get my associate's degree, my bachelor's, my master's, and I was halfway through my PhD before getting elected into Congress. I go from an E1 to an E9 to a Master Chief. So clearly the program works, and there needs to be more programs like that where you're based on merit, how hard you're willing to work. When I was a chief, I never asked, hey, what's your GPA? You know, where do you go to school? All you cared about, are you willing to work hard, help the mission and get things accomplished? So I think it's a great idea that the Navy in particular views that, and I think all services should follow suit.
Wonderful. Well, Congressman Gonzales, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, great, thanks.